Bringing in my buddy Chad Withrow now. Chad, I know I want to start off. Obviously, we got a lot of NFL and college football related stories that are out there as we roll into the weekend. But I'm still in love, and I know you are as well, with the decision that was made by LSU to selflessly restrict themselves from going to a bowl game. Tomorrow they will lose likely to Florida. They're around a 23-point underdog, which will drop them to 3-6. They might well lose to Ole Miss if that game happens the final week of the season, which would drop them to 3-7. This is an amazing move to ban themselves from a bowl game.
Well, I think we should just take a second to applaud LSU for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And really setting an example for the rest of the country that shows that, cheaters don't prosper. And
Yes.
that if you cheat, you should call yourself out and give yourself a truly harsh punishment.
Severe
like
punishment.
not going to a bowl game in 2020 where there are no fans there anyways in the midst of a 3-7 season. Clay, this is the equivalent of you used to work at Abercrombie and Fitch, right?
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day. Was that the store
Yes.
you worked at? You got fired from Abercrombie and Fitch.
I worked, for people who don't know, I worked my first ever job was at Media Play, which a lot of people don't remember, but that was it was a big box retailer. They were going to sell every CD you could imagine. They had books, they had movies, and I worked there in the book department. And then I worked at American Eagle, which was like a still popular kind of teenage clothing chain. And then I went and worked at Abercrombie and Fitch. And when I was in college, I worked at the Pentagon City Mall. For people who know Washington, D.C., I would get on the metro, the subway in D.C., and I would ride to Pentagon City Mall. And I worked right near the Ritz-Carlton where Marv Albert, which was a part of the Pentagon City Mall, where Marv Albert memorably put on women's underwear and used to bite women. Do you remember that? Like that was his thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Who can forget?
Yeah. He's such a good at calling NBA games that people have forgotten. And also where Monica Lewinsky was confronted by Ken Starr. So I worked at that Abercrombie and Fitch, and I was fired from that Abercrombie and Fitch because I went to a Washington Redskins Denver Broncos game that I got tickets for at the last minute instead of showing up for work.
So let's carry out this analogy. So pick any of those. We'll say Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yeah.
So Clay, this is what LSU has done. This is the equivalent of you working at Abercrombie and Fitch and getting caught stealing cash from the register. And then as a self-imposed punishment, you decide that you are going to ban yourself from the awkward holiday party for the company. and that's going to be your punishment, and then everything is going to be fine. This is what LSU has done. They've decided we're not going to attend the awkward holiday party in hopes that the NCAA does nothing else to us. It is a total SEC move.
Yeah.
It's hilarious on many fronts. Meanwhile, Will Wade just continues to coach without any penalties after being recorded by the FBI talking about a strong-ass offer that he made to Javonte Smart and that he gave to him. And, of course, there's no paper trail for what's been paid to some of the LSU basketball players. I tweet something out about it, and LSU fans are saying, "Oh, there's no proof. There's no proof with Will Wade. The Blue Bloods have been doing it for years. Talk about Zion Williamson." And I'm thinking, well, yeah, cheating happens in college sports. No one is denying that.
I kind of wish. I've been arguing this for a long time. I wish everything was just 100% wide open, right? And what I mean by that is Carson Wentz got benched for Jalen Hurts, right? And what's the number one story about Carson Wentz? How much money he's making and the fact that he stinks. Not that he stinks. It's how much money he's making and the fact that he stinks. I kind of wish that there was just open bidding for anybody to go to any school that they want to go to. And that as a result of that, we knew who were the people that were getting paid that really stunk. Because I'll tell you now, fans get upset when a 5-star recruit doesn't pan out at their school. Think about how much more upset fans would be if they had paid for that 5-star recruit to go to their school and then he turns into a bum, which happens pretty regularly, right? In fact, I think like every 5-star recruit that Tennessee has signed for the last decade has ended up being a bum.
Yeah, Tennessee somehow finds a way to find the one 5-star that doesn't work out. Whatever that percentage is, the 2%, the 5 stars that don't pan out, Tennessee finds them. But also, think of the heel turn of let's say, a Will Wade. at LSU, who was on recorded saying he made a strong-ass offer to a player. If coaches could come out and just say, so did you think those 2 missed free throws at the end of the game when talking to the media, do you think that was worthy of a new Mercedes for his mom that we gave him? I don't think so. I really think we should try to get some money back or get something back from them. I would love it if coaches could just come out and discuss what they gave or what a booster gave a player.
That's
they're
what's
really angry with the player.
That's what's so interesting to me about the whole pay-for-play concept is once you know what somebody's making, then the dynamics change in a big way, and the expectations get ratcheted up in a big way. But also, I'm kind of just curious. Like, I'm a guy who believes in markets, right? I don't ever get upset at anybody for what they get paid if they have talent, right? Now, you might say somebody's overpaid. You might say somebody's underpaid. But that's kind of how we talk about sports. In fact, salaries, contracts, free agency, that's a massive part, certainly, of talking about pro sports. But what would the value actually be? Because there are a lot of busts. And so I think I would be interested to see where the market would set itself, because initially there would be a ton of money that would come flowing in. But just like any other marketplace, if you overpay for talent, then the market ends up setting itself back, right? And so not everybody's going to not every stock turns into Amazon, right? So the vast majority of stocks that you buy are going to perform mediocre, right? That's why you buy a basket of stocks. That's basically what a recruiting class is. It's a basket of potential winners over the next 3 and 4 years. But you know how a recruiting class goes. There's 5 or 6 guys that live up to expectations. There's like 10 that are below expectations. And then you hope there's 10 that are above expectations. Or maybe there's 5 or 6 that are above, 5 or 6 are below, 10 that are about expectation. Whatever the math is, the math would set itself out in an interesting way. And I'm just kind of fascinated to see how it would all shake out.
Well, this whole thing you're talking about, Clay, exists in college sports, and we talk about it with coaches. What's the first thing that comes up with Jim Harbaugh when he's not winning? It's his salary. It's how much he's making.
And for Jimbo Fisher, before this season, it was like, man, the Aggies are paying $7.5 million a year. They sure aren't getting their money's worth.
Well, so here would be my next question. When is the market going to shake itself out with college football coaches or college basketball coaches? At what point do the salaries start to go down because so many of these guys suck? And get paid so much money to not do much.
This is a fascinating point, and this has been my argument that I've made for a while. Never. And the reason why is because the way you prove that you care is by paying your guy somewhat close to somebody else's guy, right? So let me give you an example. Nick Saban makes around $10 million a year. Let's just round it up. He is by far, historically, the most dominant coach of all time. If you are the best at something in a normal, like, winner-takes-all environment, Nick Saban would make like $50 million a year, and nobody else would make more than like $7 or $8 million a year in the SEC. In other words, Nick Saban would be like 5 times as highly compensated as everybody else. Same thing, by the way, LeBron James, right? In the NBA, LeBron James should be making $100 million a year because of the swing with which he will, his movement swings the success rates of teams on a massive level. LeBron James is salary capped. There's no salary cap in college coaching. But what happens is schools will set the new bar with Nick Saban, and then the teams that don't have Nick Saban, well, Auburn's got to pay Gus Malzahn $7 million a year, because if they're only paying $2 million a year, Auburn fans are like, why don't we compete with Alabama? It's because our coach isn't paid enough money, right? So Nick Saban's success is actually, he's the rising tide that is lifting every boat. So those guys, the way that schools prove they care, even if their guy is nowhere near half as good as Nick Saban, in the case of a guy like Gus Malzahn, we'll pay him 70 or 80% of Nick Saban's salary, because if we're not doing that, it looks like we're not trying as hard.
Well, it's what you're bringing up, Clay, is spot on. And there's not many other industries or places where this type of pay happens.
There are.
For instance, I'm reading a book right now, and it talks about ice cream flavors. Okay, what are the top 10 ice cream flavors out there that people purchase? Well, number 1 is vanilla, number 2 is chocolate, and then it's like butter pecan. Well,
Yeah.
people would think, okay, vanilla's number one. Well, then there's a slight drop-off in chocolate. Then there's a slight drop-off in butter pecan. Then there's a slight drop-off in cookies and cream. That's not the case at all. It is 10 times the amount of vanilla as opposed to the 10th place ice cream. It's about half that for chocolate. So when you look at this scale and you look at a chart, it's vanilla way up here, then it goes down like stairs, all the way down to someone that's at 10%. Well, what does the 10th ranked coach in America get paid in terms of salary? The 10th best coach. They probably get paid pretty close, right? Maybe
that's
half
interesting.
Of what the number one does. And it doesn't work that way in other places. They should be making a 10th of what Nick Saban makes.
Yeah.
The 10th ranked coach should make $1 million if Nick Saban's making 10. If the 10th ranked coach is making $5 million, then Nick Saban should be making $50 million, to your point.
Here's another point in that. Like, we're in the radio industry. Howard Stern makes $120 million a year, reportedly, under his new deal with SiriusXM. I'm not sure that anybody else makes more than $25 million, right? So Howard Stern is on an entirely different stratosphere. And by the way, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think Rush Limbaugh would make around $25 million a year. And that's obviously a wildly successful radio guy. But Howard Stern is in a different stratosphere. Nobody else is making $100 million to Howard Stern's $120 or even 60, 70, 80, 90, not even close to it, right? And that's been kind of the question in the world of sports with broadcast, because Tony Romo is now making $17 million a year. And I've talked to a bunch of people in the broadcasting industry, and the conversation they have is that Romo contract akin to what happened with Howard Stern, or are there going to be multiple guys making $17 million a year? Is Troy Aikman going to be a $17 million a year guy? Is Chris Collinsworth? Is the rising tide of Tony Romo going to lift everybody else's boat? Or are we going to end up in a situation where Romo is way more? And by the way, you know who's trying to test this right now? Jim Nantz. Because Jim Nantz sitting around saying, wait a minute, my broadcast partner only for the NFL, Tony Romo, makes $17 million a year. I do the Masters. I do the NCAA tournament. I call the Final Four. I do the Super Bowl. And NFL is just a part of what Jim Nantz does. So if I'm Nantz, I'm like, I deserve at least $17 million too, right? So we'll see whether the marketplace agrees.
It's one of those where it's not fair, right? It's all about interest. It's all about the options for Tony Romo and where he could go. So they had to outbid at the time. Because in a fair market, in a fair world, Jim Nantz, with the amount of work that he does, and as long as he's been around and as long as he's done it at a high level,
yes,
he should be making a lot more than Tony Romo, quite frankly. But the only way that Jim Nantz is going to get the leverage necessary to
somebody else
going to
have to hire him away,
is if ESPN tries to hire him away to pair him with Peyton Manning on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
And say, we're going to bring back the mystique and the prestige of Monday Night Football with these two guys. That's the only way he's going to make what he wants.
Yeah, and that's why I've made the argument before, like, for all these other SEC schools, I don't understand why they never just offered Nick Saban $20 million. Like, right? I mean, if he's that much better than everybody else, why would you not offer him $20 million? Because then Alabama probably would pay him $21 million to stay, but at least then you're really curtailing their flexibility as a business, right? If they have an asset that they're underpaying, it allows them to make money other ways. Like to me, Nick Saban on the open market is worth $25 million a year. Because I think within 5 years at a decent program, he would win you a national championship like he's done at Alabama. How much is that worth? A lot of money. Speaking of a lot of money, Withrow, would you retire as a college football fan if Sarah Fuller kicked a field goal to beat Tennessee on Saturday? Because not only would it be the pain of losing to an 0-8 Vanderbilt team as the kicker comes in, who's never actually been a kicker before, bombs one through to win, but also because she's a female kicker, that treatment, that movie immediately becomes the new Rudy. And you are never able to escape it. And every time you turn on the television, like Rudy's on conservatively 365 days a year somewhere. Rudy's always on, right? The movie Rudy. she would be the new Rudy. And that game would be everywhere, and Tennessee would be the perpetual villain. Now, most people don't even remember who Rudy is playing against. It's Georgia Tech when he makes his sack. But so fortunately, Georgia Tech is not a huge part of this story. But Vanderbilt beating their hated in-state rival with the female kicker making, it doesn't even have to be a field goal. It could be an extra point. Would you feel compelled to retire as a University of Tennessee football fan?
Would I feel compelled to retire?
Would you?
Yes.
Yes.
Would I retire? Probably not. Would I take at least a season off of any emotional attachment or care whatsoever about the sport of college football? Absolutely. Would I avoid that movie on TNT
for the next 40 years of your life?
Like the plague? Absolutely. I would avoid it at all costs. I mean, I've said this. I think that Jeremy Pruitt and Philip Fulmer should have some sort of gentleman's agreement, a handshake agreement before this game, that if Jeremy Pruitt loses to Vandy with 45 scholarship players and everything going on with that program right now, Tennessee, I think, it's up to a 15.5-point favorite in that game. If Jeremy Pruitt were to lose this game, Jeremy Pruitt should just go into Philip Fulmer and resign immediately after the game and say, look, this just isn't working out. I thought I could do it, but I'm more of a defensive coordinator. I'm going to go to Bama or go somewhere else and be a defensive coordinator again because this just isn't happening.
I
don't think
idea.
That'll happen because I do think Tennessee continues to play hard. I don't see any real give up with the team. They're just not playing well. So I think that they win on Saturday. But man, what a story that would be, Clay, if your scenario played out.
Well, I think also Jeremy Pruitt on the opposing team sideline, I think he would have to just take his headset off. And I don't even think he goes to the media. I think he just walks right out of the stadium. Like, his career is over, like goes and hails an Uber on West End Avenue outside. He's like, yeah, I'm out. You know, I'm not even getting on the team bus to drive back or whatever else. But it would be. I mean, you agree with me that it would be the next Rudy, right? They would make a movie.
Yeah,
it would be everywhere.
I think just the whole thing, you know, like the little the bylines in the movie about what happened to every character. In the movie, it would just have something. Jeremy Pruitt, after this game, went back to Alabama and coached a high school team for the next 20 years of his career. And we never heard from him again. Never did any interviews to talk about it. You know, that's sort of what would happen with this story. Like, he would just emerge at some 2A high school, you know, outside of Huntsville, and that's where he would finish out his career after that game.
I think that there would be a character modeled on me who would be one of the big villains, right? Like, there would be a media person who had made fun of the 25-yard kick, and like either they would have a star turn where they end up like crying on the field, like, oh, my life has changed forever. I didn't know a woman could make an extra point. And that would be like me.